Okay, so heliocentrism and the Catholic Church time. So you get Copernicus here, 1543. The heliocentric theory simply is the sun is the center of the universe or our universe, not the Earth. Okay, and then this is going to be a little problematic because the Church has since most people since Ptolemy, Aristotle, we'll go back to the Greeks. Everybody figures that no, it's the Earth is the center of the universe, and everything revolves around it, and that's why, that's why you wake up in the morning and the sun is coming up over the mountains in the east. It's the idea that it's the sun coming up over the mountains. The mountains aren't moving; it's the sun that's moving, and then boom, it goes overhead. But for centuries, for millennia, people wondered, gee, why, how come the sun? Sometimes the sun comes up over that part of the mountain, and other times it comes. So it's a little strange that the sun, but it was indicative that for most people that it was the sun that was moving, and the moon moved even more, and the planets. And people back in the day really spent a lot of time staring out into space because they it's stars at night. They had no idea, and some of the explanations were completely absurd or creative. So that's a game changer, and it's going to push up against the traditional church teaching. So the church in 1545, remember now, this is 25 years after Luther. This is the Council of Trent, and the goal is to stop the spread of Protestantism. And it's the big idea here is that only the church can interpret the Bible. Okay, and that's a key Catholic doctrine. The church, not individuals, interpret the Bible. So if there is a biblical account that may seem a little bit contradictory to another biblical account, the idea of corroboration, it's the church that has the final say, not Martin Luther and not some principality in Sweden or Germany, and that's a big deal at this point for the church. So much so that the church sets up what is known as the Inquisition, which is this sort of court that is going to combat heresy. And if you're considered a heretic, you will face the wrath of the Inquisition. And so you see, Galileo is born, but shortly in 1600, Giordano Bruno is burned at the stake for heresy, for supporting the heliocentric theory. So the church is not, they're not fooling around here. And this is in Galileo's lifetime. He is aware of that. The problem for Galileo is he invents this telescope and he uses it, and he gathers extraordinary amounts of evidence to suggest the heliocentric model is correct. Church tells him, no, you can't be running around telling people that God's plan is not uniform and perfect, and that there is this something else out there. In fairness to the church, I think it should be stated that it was the church who watched after Luther all kinds of chaos and wars that broke out in the name of religion. And the church firmly believed that stuff like the stars and whether or not the sun moved around the earth or the earth, stuff like that was not worth the instability and war that had plagued most of Europe for a good chunk of the 16th century. So the church was looking at it from the perspective, look, we don't need these new ideas. We just want folks to get back to a normal routine that let them farm, let them raise their cattle, let's let them live the simple life, go to church. The life expectancy was like 30. And why would we have to rock the boat so much? And that was the church's perspective. It wasn't, that was a perspective of the church. So, where it went from that, the Inquisition and the attacks on heresy, not excusing that, but you do have to see that the inclination for the church is for stability and peace. Okay, so then we move down here. You see Galileo. He publishes his thing. He is charged. His books are banned, He is charged in Rome with heresy, and he is convicted of heresy, but he is asked, look, you take it back, recant. And he does do that. Passes away in 1642. Newton comes around. He's English, because, here you see 1661. England is, Henry V. He creates the Church of England. He breaks with the church. So, and England is on an island. So there's a little more flexibility to take risks and to confront or disagree with the church. And that, I think, that's politically, that's the big idea behind Newton. Scientifically, Newton is just going to completely upend and bring scientific advances to a level that's really going to advance the ideas of science. You can see that the church here, 1758, 1939, so over another 200-year period, the church does move away from this idea that science is evil, banning books, and then they call him a hero, etc. And we'll actually look at this function here in 1979. If you look, so going to document A, so this is Galileo's letter. The source, it's a letter to the Grand Duchess of Christina of Tuscany, which is a small city-state in Italy, and 1615. And he writes this to defend himself. And so here is Galileo's defense. All right? And what he is saying is that the Bible is difficult to interpret. There are places in the Bible that contradict other places, or they're not clear, or maybe they mean this, but maybe they mean that. And in the spirit of the Protestant Reformation, Galileo is taking it on himself to say that I think it means this, okay? But the Bible is difficult to interpret, and he does agree, and he uses this piece here sort of is him thinking out his defense. And he says, the reason given for attacking the opinion that the earth moves and the sun stands still is that in many places in the Bible, one may read that the sun moves and the earth stands still. Since the Bible cannot err, since the Bible cannot be wrong, it follows that anyone who claims that the sun is motionless and the earth movable takes an erroneous and heretical position. So he's laying out the position of the church. And then he says, with regard to this argument, he says it is pious, faithful, believing, obedient to God to say, and prudent to believe that the Holy Bible cannot be wrong whenever it's true. But then he adds this piece, whenever its true meaning is understood. Okay. And then he says, nobody will deny that the Bible is often very complex and may say things which are quite different from what its bare words signify. Galileo is basically interpreting the Bible, and he's saying the Bible is not wrong. It's just difficult to understand. And then in the last piece, he says, God has given senses, reason, and intellect, and he has intended us to use them. He says, I don't believe God would give us these senses and the ability to think and then ask us not to use them. He wants us to use them, okay? And by using them, he says, I am interpreting the Bible to mean this, and I believe, and I don't believe that, and he says that here, can an opinion be heretical and have no concern with the salvation of souls? So the Bible is hard to understand. God gave humans the ability to think. And he says, is it possible that we disagree on what the Bible means without it meaning that I am a heretic? Okay. And so he is challenging, at the heart of what he is saying, he is challenging the notion of who has the last and final say on what the Bible means. And if you jump up, like we mentioned here, if you see the Council of Trent gives the Pope and the Church Fathers and the authorities of the church, it makes it clear that only the church can interpret the Bible. Okay, and so that's going to be problematic. Document B is Cardinal Bellarmine, and he is in charge. He's the dude who works for the Pope, so he's a cardinal, and he's one of the top religious authorities in the church. He's in Rome. And what else do we know? And this is from his letter on Galileo's theories, which he sends to, what's this dude? Foscarini, Paolo Antonio Foscarini, who is defending Galileo's book. So this is a letter from the church under the title of Cardinal Bellarmine, to a guy that's defending Galileo's position, and he says, and he gets to the point right away. The Council of Trent prohibits interpreting the scriptures contrary to the common agreement of the Holy Fathers, just as we said above. The church interprets the Bible, not Galileo, not you or Galileo, okay? And that was spelled out in the Council of Trent. And all the church fathers have concluded that the sun is in the heavens and moves swiftly around the earth, and that the earth is far from the heavens and stands immobile. It sits still in the center of the universe. So first we hear that the church interprets the Bible, okay? Not Galileo, not Luther, not you. And the church says that the sun moves around the earth, not the other way around. The earth is at the center of the universe, and that's it. And he goes one step further, and he says, if there was a true demonstration that the sun was in the center and the earth in the third sphere, and that the sun did not travel around the, and he goes on, he says, well, it would be necessary. He said we would have to reevaluate. We would be very cautious in explaining what the scripture, because the scripture says that the earth is at the center, or in some instances it says that, and maybe in other instances it's a little murky, but the church has ruled on that. The church says that the sun moves around the earth, and that Galileo and you are wrong. And because we cannot see that, and because you cannot prove it, that the sun is at the center, then it cannot be true. And then finally, in the end, he says, it sure feels like, he's basically saying, one clearly experiences that the earth stands still. And it sure feels like the earth is not moving, and I can see the sun move across the sky every day. So this is the church's position. This is 1615, and you can see that any effort by Galileo, if he keeps pushing on this, there's going to be a problem. There already is a problem, and so he's going to have to answer for that, and that's documented. Condemnation of Galileo, and if we jump down here, you can see the crime of Galileo, indictment and abjuration of 1633. And we see that 1632, Galileo is called and summoned to Rome to stand trial. There is the relevant witnesses, and the judges issue the following condemnation of Galileo. So it says here, you, Galileo of Florence, were denounced in 1615 by this holy office for holding as true a false doctrine taught by many, namely, that the sun is immovable in the center of the world, and that the earth moves, also for explaining the scriptures according to your own meaning. So the big idea that we mentioned earlier, the church believes that because it is empowered by God, the church acts on behalf of God to interpret the Holy Bible. So this is a critical difference between Protestantism now and Catholicism, in that the church, Catholics believe that the church interprets scripture, and Protestants believe that individuals can account for different explanations in the Bible. And this is meant to be as a more enriching, not so much to thumb your nose at the church, but it's meant to be more of an enriching experience of Christ. Then next paragraph, he says, therefore, by the desire of his holiness and the most eminent lords, the two propositions of the stability of the sun and the motion of the earth were. So here are the two big reasons. One, the proposition that the sun is in the center of the world and immovable from its place is absurd, philosophically false, and formally heretical, because it is expressly contrary to holy scriptures. So the church has ruled that according to the Bible, Earth is the center of the world. It does not move, and other stars, planets, and suns move around it. Then the second notion is that the proposition, again, is also absurd, philosophically false, and theologically considered at least erroneous in faith. So, that the earth is not. So the opposite here they're saying is that if the sun is not only the center of the world, but the notion that the earth is not the center of the world is also absurd, philosophically false, and erroneous in faith. And there's some big ideas here. The notion of absolutism is one I want to introduce here. And the church is embracing the idea of absolutism, which holds that there are certain truths to the world which cannot be undone. There is right and there is wrong. And historically, absolutism has been used to justify centralized power, like in a king, or in this case, the Pope. So absolutists are those who believe that that a strong, powerful government on earth, not unlike God, like God, there needs to be a strong central authority because people, and this is a big idea, people need leadership. They need to be they too much thinking, not a good thing. And again, remember, like we said earlier, this is the church acting in 1633. There has been widespread destruction as a result of the Protestant movement and the reactions to it. But much of Northern Europe has been destroyed. Lots of people killed in wars, and so the church is making the case like, look, this has gotten out of hand, and the people need a strong God. They need a strong church, and without that, there is chaos. This is from 1992. So recently, in the last 28, 29 years, it's from the New York Times newspaper in New York, and it tells us that some 350 years later, the current Pope, Pope John Paul II, ordered an investigation of the Catholic Church treatment of Galileo, and this article sums it up. So essentially, the Vatican, where the church has its is centered in Rome, where the Pope lives. He says that Galileo was right, and that the church made a mistake, and they erred in condemning Galileo 359 years ago. For suggesting that Earth revolves around the sun. And then he goes on, and the article references that this is one of the most notorious, one of the reasons why we study this is one of history's most notorious conflicts between faith and science, and Galileo was forced to recant or take back his scientific findings in order to avoid being burned at the stake. So people often point to this and quickly condemn the church. And Pope John Paul II is trying to reconcile something that is going to be a big deal in the next after Galileo. The world has to. It's the conflict between faith and science. And it's the idea that as science becomes more influential in the daily lives of humans, it's important to reconcile traditional faith-based beliefs. So, can science completely replace religion? Has religion gotten in the way of science? And these are questions that we ask ourselves, and we want to make sense of that. And I've added, he says, he said that the theologians who condemned Galileo did not recognize the formal distinction between the Bible and its interpretation. And this led them to move a question which in fact pertained to scientific investigation into the realm of the doctrine of the faith. So Pope John Paul is trying to draw a distinction between science and faith. And I've included over here a quote from Martin Luther King, which I think does a nice job of putting out the religious perspective here. And he says, and this is Martin Luther King Jr. from, I believe this is 1960 something. And yes, he's named after Martin Luther. I don't want you to confuse those two, but this is the guy you've probably heard of. And Martin Luther King Jr. says that science investigates and religion interprets. Science gives man knowledge, which is power. Religion gives man wisdom, which is control. Science deals mainly with facts, religion deals mainly with values, and the two are not rivals. So King here, and this is in the 1960s, he is also trying to make the peace between science and faith. And by the 1960s, by the 1990s, the world has changed because of science, and people all over the world are beneficiaries of scientific breakthroughs, whether it's medicine or a cell phone, um, or an abundance of food. All of these things can be connected directly to great scientific advances. But still, the Pope, and again, Dr. King, who is a religious, he is a Christian minister, they are still trying to find a place where the two of them can coexist, and that the two are not, as King says, they're not rivals. So that's the idea here for document D. And, from a modern perspective, the Pope is saying that Galileo was right. And then the last piece here, 17th century theologians were working with the knowledge available to them at the time. And this is a big historical idea that individuals make decisions. We understand history through the eyes of the individuals, and individuals understand and make decisions based on their experiences. So in 1632, you were not aware of a penicillin vaccine, and you were not aware of the iPhone, and maybe you certainly didn't drive in a car. So as you develop these experiences, it's important to understand this is the way people were thinking at the time.